What are the strongest days?
What?
Saturday and Sunday. The rest are weekdays. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Brand Coverage. I'm Brandon Carney alongside Pat Gustafson. Pat, the fantasy football season is, look, a lot of people probably got eliminated this past week.
Hopefully it's not over for everyone.
Yeah, no, in a lot of these leagues, look, I have my brain on like how our league works, where it's 2-week playoff matchups, and they started a couple weeks ago. But like this past week in a lot of standard leagues, this was week 1 of their 1 week playoff matchup league, which is what is truly standard across the industry at this point. So sadly, a lot of people listening and watching are probably eliminated from their leagues, and there are just that many more people no longer playing fantasy football. And I think it's a reminder of, man, this season goes by so fast, and I hate it. Dude, I hate it so much. Like
I remember agonizing over this shit back in August.
I saw a tweet from a fellow content creator, Wyatt's World, who's also on hiatus from content right now. So, hope my boy can get back at it soon. But he tweeted something like either right before the season started or like week 1. I think it was like week 2, and it was during like a bad primetime game or something. And he goes, look, everyone just appreciate this, because eventually we're going to get to that point where it's like week 14 and the season's about to end. And I'm like, yeah, we're already past that. And it's crazy how much faster it seems to go by every year. I think it goes by even faster for me, honestly, just because I'm so wrapped up in it content-wise that it's like everything's so fast-moving. But I felt like football season always went by fast, even when I was just, normal job, just watching as a fan, just playing fantasy. Like, it still went by super fast, and now it's just even faster. But look, for those of you who are still playing the wonderful game of fantasy football and trying to win a championship, trying to finish out your season strong, we will be trying to give you the tools to do that. But in all honesty, as the next few weeks, chug along here, this show will be transitioning a little more into just general NFL coverage and maybe even other sports. We love to talk college basketball. We'll even talk a little bit of baseball here and there. And probably college football playoff too for, once those games happen. But yeah, that's just kind of the nature of the podcast. We're not going to do, totally fantasy-centric once the fantasy football season's over. Still going on right now, but just to kind of prime you guys for the future. I am excited for, some playoff prediction shows and stuff like that once we get to that point. So
it'll still be real-life football.
Right. It'll still be a great time here on the old Brand Coverage podcast. And speaking of non-fantasy football stuff, Pat.
Good evening. I'm Ron Burgundy, and this is what's happening in your world tonight.
Probably the biggest piece of news we had over the past week. It happened shortly after our last show, but Bill Belichick hired at the University of North Carolina. I'm repping, for those of you watching us visually here on YouTube, I am wearing my Bill Belichick Carolina Tar Heel short sleeve hoodie. This is a little probably thinner than something he would go for. It's not so much a hoodie as much as
too many sleeves.
It's like he likes to go with the short sleeve cut off. I did go with the short sleeve hoodie for a reason. But yeah, a little thinner than probably what he would be used to. But yeah, Bill Belichick, man, head coach at North Carolina, we heard these rumblings over like the couple days leading up to it, but I still didn't really fully believe it, and really just maybe the last place I would have expected him to end up, college in general.
I kind of even still didn't believe it. I think Cliff Kingsbury said like, I won't believe it till I see him coaching a game, but like, he's already signed his first transfers.
Like, from Holy Cross.
Of course, it's a fucking center from Holy Cross. Like, that is so Bill Belichick. Yeah, it's just... I kind of thought he was just doing it just to kind of see what interview and see what college would be like in that sense. And also kind of as like a stepping stone for NFL teams saying like, hey, I could go to North Carolina, give me everything. And the fact that he didn't even wait to hear out some of these NFL teams just goes to show that this is what he really wants to do. Because that almost any team, looking for a head coach, whether it be the Jags or the Bears, the Cowboys, the Giants, the Raiders, whoever, would be going after him. And there's some decent jobs in there. So for him to not even give that thought and to just say, I'm going for it, means that this is what he wants to do. And I just can't fucking believe it. Like, Bill Belichick, the greatest football coach ever, is coaching at the University of North Carolina.
It's one of those things that, and I tweeted this when North Carolina tweeted out their official like picture and graphic of signing Bill Belichick. I was like, yeah, we splintered into a different timeline at some point where this is what Bill Belichick is up to in the year 2024, 2025 being his first actual coaching year. But Pat, you mentioned this is what he really wants to do, and he didn't wait for these NFL jobs. I wonder if there were NFL opportunities, because there were some rumors that, he kind of had his finger on the pulse, obviously. Guys that are prospective coaches, or new, soon to be hired coaches, they tend to know whether like teams are going to be at least vaguely interested and if they're really on the table. And I mean, look, this is a guy that went unhired last coaching cycle, and that was like surprising in itself. I think after he went unhired last cycle, I wouldn't necessarily be shocked if he didn't get hired this cycle either, had he not taken the North Carolina job. So and that's not to say he definitely wouldn't have, but to me, that's kind of what the college job indicates a little bit more than just, I really want to coach in college. I'm not sure he had a lot of options.
I think a lot of it last year had to do with some teams already having made up their mind, like the Raiders, for example, were going to hire Antonio Pierce, and other teams just wanted to move in the other direction, like getting a young offensive-minded coach like Dave Canales. I think with a year going by now, I think there definitely would have been at least one team that would have said Bill Belichick is the direction we wanted to go in. And obviously the two big ones are the Cowboys and the Raiders, just because the fact that their owners love the limelight, they love big splashy moves. And I figured both of those two teams would be absolutely chomping at the bit. So, but you may be right. But I think part of it too is I think he wants the challenge. He said that he wants to try something new. Obviously with NIL, it's a little more similar to the pros than it would have been, say, 5 years ago. Yeah. But I think he wants the challenge, and it's good that he went to a school like North Carolina and not like Alabama or Texas, Oklahoma, Georgia, one of these perennial favorites. He went to North Carolina, who really has not done much except produce mid-NFL quarterbacks for the last decade and a half.
Hey, we're changing that, all right? I saw a lot of posts about it. It feels like him and Drake May are like ships passing in the night because of, Bill was at the Pats, and then Drake May went from North Carolina to the Patriots. Now Bill's in North Carolina. I'm excited to see it play out because as UConn guys, Pat, and obviously you're also a Central Connecticut guy, but like, our favorite college football teams are not probably ever going to be truly competitive. I mean, unless there's some conference shakeups, and then you never know what can happen. But like as it stands, UConn football. Yeah. As it stands, UConn football is not, anywhere close to being like a college football playoff or national championship level program. But like North Carolina, I'm excited to have another team to just kind of root for on the side here and see what Bill Belichick can do. And as far as like what he can do as far as an NFL pipeline, I think some people probably laughed at that because of Bill's lack of success coaching at the Patriots for the last few years, but like I think it's more of just he is going to teach these kids what it's going to be like to be a pro. Now, when he says he's going to be a pipeline to the NFL, I don't think he's trying to say that he's going to be churning out 10 to 15 NFL players every year. It's the University of North Carolina. I'm sure they'll probably go up a little bit in terms of, maybe the NFL talent they can acquire, but it's not going to be like that. It's going to be more that he's just going to have guys that, when they get into those interviews and they get into the draft process, I think they're probably going to be able to impress some of these NFL teams, maybe more so than players from other programs. I think in that respect, again, to tie it back to UConn, like that's something you hear about these UConn prospects that have come out into the NBA the last few years under like the Dan Hurley program, because they say he runs it like a pro team. And so like I know that's one of the things we heard about Stephon Castle, current rookie of the year front runner in the NBA, that he just knows what it takes to be a professional player. And I think that's probably the sort of thing that Belichick is going for at North Carolina. And I'm excited to see it play out. I'm glad he's on a sideline again. But it's definitely interesting to try to picture him, coaching 20-year-olds and younger teenagers.
And especially with the ever-expanding playoff, and even with the ACC being the fourth best conference in the country, they still managed to sneak two teams into the playoffs here.
Yeah.
So there's no reason why North Carolina can't challenge the likes of Clemson on a yearly basis. I mean, SMU jumped from the American to the playoff in an at-large bid. So, like, it's very possible, even potentially as early as this year, just with how much these rosters change in college football, they could be contending for a playoff spot. Obviously, we have no idea what that roster is going to look like, but just with the new landscape, it's possible sooner than you think, I think.
Obviously, Belichick signing with a college team has produced just endless content. But before we move on, I think my absolute favorite thing I saw was like North Carolina. Hey, we could sign Bill Belichick and, really draw up some buzz for the program. That sounds like a good idea, right? And then Bill Belichick, here is 200 pages on how I will destroy Dabo Swinney with punt coverage. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds about right, because he did apparently give, I think it was actually 400 pages to North Carolina about like what he planned to do with the program. And I'm like, man, this man is a lunatic, but he's a lunatic that loves ball, and I'm excited to see him back on the sideline. I'm excited to see him interact with the media again and not be part of the media anymore.
I've also forgotten about the Big 12. The ACC is not the fourth best. They are the third.
Oh yeah, I didn't even hear you say that, but yeah, it's fine. All right, next piece here, Pat. The Detroit Lions. So. Yeah, where's the thing?
Play it.
Before we even get to the actual segment.
For real.
Man, it makes me so sad. And look, I'm not writing the Lions off just yet, but their Super Bowl aspirations have taken a pretty sizable gut punch here. So in their last game, lost David Montgomery to an MCL injury. Montgomery was asked about this at, I believe it was like a toy drive he was doing today, which is crazy and very inspiring to do.
Goated.
The day after you injure your MCL and are supposedly out for the season. But he was saying that he might or he's hoping to be able to return before the end of the season, that it's at least semi on the table. But as of right now, I mean, we're obviously treating it as he's probably done for the year. So David Montgomery, MCL, done for the year. Aleem McNeil, ACL, done for the year. And Carlton Davis, broken jaw, out indefinitely. The Lions are now down 6 defensive starters from week 1. Aiden Hutchinson, Marcus Davenport, Aleem McNeil, Alex Anzalone, Derek Barnes, and Carlton Davis, along with plenty of second stringers who have also gotten hurt that were coming in to replace those guys. The only one who is expected back is Alex Anzalone here in the next few weeks. And then, as we've heard all year, maybe Aiden Hutchinson in like the NFC title game or later.
He said he's still targeting the Super Bowl here.
I mean, truthfully, I wouldn't be surprised that with that guy. Like, he's such a freak.
These guys are psychos. I was going to say,
I'm sure he's literally waking up, rehabbing for 12 hours, and then going to bed and repeat. So, or probably 18 hours. There's no way that guy's getting 12 hours of sleep. But either way, the Lions are absolutely down horrendous due to injury. But I think it just brings up the question, because they've been the strongest contender in the NFC. They've been probably the strongest contender in the NFL as the entire year has gone on. Can they still win it all? And if you believe they can, where would you place them in like a power ranking right now for possible Super Bowl contenders or champions? Because it's getting bad, man. Their offense is still as good as you can really hope for. They haven't lost much on offense, but they did lose kind of like their engine on offense with David Montgomery. That's really a guy that is a big part of their identity.
We're really going to see what Jahmyr Gibbs is made of here the next 2 weeks to end the year, and then in the playoffs. I would still say at the very least you've still got to expect them to make the NFC Championship game. But their offense is really going to have to carry. And I mean, you look at these teams like Minnesota and Green Bay, who may not be quite as good as their records indicate, but they're going to go out there and put points on the board. Like, that's how they're going to beat you, is they're going to go and score. I think really the only team that they would have to worry about being shut down by, is the Eagles. Mm-hmm. Is the Eagles there? So it's just going to be a question of, can this offense keep up? And, again, only losing David Montgomery, I don't think that's really going to change things. You've still got Jahmyr Gibbs. You've still got Amon-Ra St. Brown. You've still got Jamison Williams, Sam Laporta. Tim Patrick proved us wrong again, caught another touchdown. Yeah. Someone asked about Tim Patrick. Pick him up. But they still have what it takes offensively. It's just going to be a matter of, can these guys step in? But I would say at the very least, Buffalo's playing really well. You can never count the fucking Chiefs out of anything.
I know.
And the Eagles have looked good on both sides of the football here, so...
Yeah, I tweeted this after the game, and this wasn't even in response to the injuries necessarily. It was just in response to how the game between the Lions and the Bills went. And I was like, I think my conclusion from Bills-Lions is that the Eagles are winning the Super Bowl. And that was I won't say indictment, but, a slight indictment of both the Lions and the Bills, because the Bills, I know they've played both the Rams and the Lions the last 2 weeks, which are two of the best offenses in football, but I'm just not going to put my chips onto a team that is allowing 40-plus points in back-to-back weeks on their defense. Meanwhile, the Eagles, throughout the year, are just continually holding even good offenses to, like, pretty low point totals. You look over the past few weeks, or I'll actually just go through the course of the season, the best offenses they faced. At the Ravens, they won the game and allowed 19 points. At the Rams, they won the game and allowed 20 points. Against the Commanders, won the game and allowed 18 points. At the Bengals, won the game and allowed 17 points. Like, they are holding very, very good offenses to low point totals. Meanwhile, the Bills and Lions are going out here just allowing 40 bombs. I know, and I mentioned this in the same tweet, I was like, these teams could easily go out and just outscore teams on their way to a Super Bowl. I understand.
Oh, absolutely.
It's more than possible. But as far as best bet and who I feel the best about right now, especially with these Lions injuries, out of the NFC, it's the Eagles. And I think overall, it's the Eagles. If you only allowed me to pick one team to put my money on for the Super Bowl right now, it's without a doubt the Philadelphia Eagles. And unfortunately, these Lions injuries have only made me feel even better about that. With that said, though, Pat, for fantasy football, if you've got Jahmyr Gibbs and you have moved on in your fantasy playoffs, oh boy, he might be about to go Super Saiyan.
See,
it's about to be a problem, I think.
Are we going to see fucking Craig Reynolds again? Because the same goddamn thing happened last year when David Montgomery got hurt. It wasn't that we just saw Craig Reynolds. We saw Craig Reynolds enough for it to be kind of a nuisance to Jahmyr Gibbs. But I feel like we've gone almost 2 full seasons now. And Dan Campbell has to have seen what Jahmyr Gibbs can do anywhere. Down at the goal line, on third down, short yardage, The kid can do anything. So realistically speaking, Jahmyr Gibbs should be getting 90+% of any touches that come out of that backfield.
Yeah,
but then again, you know how Dan Campbell goes with his 2 running backs. Obviously, Craig Reynolds is nowhere even in Jamal Williams' stratosphere, let alone David Montgomery. I'd like to think that Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be the ultimate league winner here, but I know Dan Campbell's just standing there ready to just piss all over that fire.
So let's see here. David Montgomery last year missed about a month from October 15th, and then he returned on November 12th. I'm just looking at what Gibbs did in that absence. So in the first game following that injury, Gibbs had only 11 carries for 68 yards, but 10 targets in the pass game, which stayed a season high for that whole season. 10 targets. He had 9 catches for 58 yards on those targets. The next game against your Las Vegas Raiders, Pat, 26 carries for 152 yards and a touchdown. I remember that game as his sort of coming out party. And then the game after that, against the Chargers, where I want to say, did they ease Montgomery? And they didn't really ease Montgomery back in too much. But those were the games that Montgomery missed. And, that Jahmyr Gibbs as a rookie, I can understand that. I think they will probably unleash him a little bit more.
That's the thing. You'd think they would have to by now, seeing what he can do.
Yeah, and I'm not sitting here saying that, Jahmyr Gibbs is going to get 90% of the carries or the touches. I think they're going to mix it, but he's going to get more than what he's gotten over these last few weeks. And Jahmyr Gibbs with any kind of elevated workload, this is one of the most purely talented backs in the league. He just happens to be on a team that doesn't need him to be worked like that, and that he's okay with, not having himself worked that way, just run into the ground, game after game. And it's a great mutually beneficial relationship. It keeps him healthy. The Lions still know how valuable he is. It's all great. But I think we might get Super Saiyan Jahmyr Gibbs here for the next few weeks. And if you have him and you're moving on, which someone in our league does, congratulations, because this could be a backpack job.
Looking at last year as well, Craig Reynolds, man, these games without Montgomery, 14 carries, 3 carries, 10 carries, 7 carries. We shouldn't even be seeing 7 touches from this guy. 3 is an acceptable number here, obviously, if you're going to put in a breather back, which you should do, obviously. But, there's just no conceivable way Dan Campbell can see what he's seen from Jahmyr Gibbs and say, I want Craig Reynolds. I want Iguodala. I get you want David Montgomery's fantastic. Of course you want him out there. Craig Reynolds, like we said, is not even fucking close to Jamal Williams. There's no way Dan Campbell But Dan Campbell is one of those guys that is willing to just go completely against the trend here.
So I'll say this. This is not a fantasy pickup by any stretch, but I am interested to see if they mix in, and I'm not even sure I'm pronouncing his name right, but Sione Vaki.
He's getting picked up a lot on Sleeper.
So this is a running back that had a decent amount of buzz in the preseason. Not that he was going to get any kind of workload this year, obviously in the most talented backfield probably in the NFL. You know, you don't find too many depth backs that are sleepers when they're behind two really good players. But this is a guy that I'm curious to see if he ends up getting some run here, you know, maybe even more than Craig Reynolds. I don't know if he's earned that in practice or not, but we'll see. But this is a guy that had, you know, a fair amount of buzz for himself, you know, throughout the preseason and the draft process. As a guy that a lot of you know, analysts really fell in love with his profile. So I'll be curious to see if he gets involved at all. Too.
Yeah. Hopefully for Jahmyr Gibbs owners, it's neither.
Yeah. And I think we're beyond the point kind of in the year for speculative ads. Maybe if this was week 8 and, you know, Montgomery was done for the year, I would say pick up Vaki just to see, because he's a better, I believe, athlete than Craig Reynolds. And so maybe
I hope so.
one injury away from a role. Probably not worth it at this point in the year, unless you're a Gibbs owner and you have really expendable bench pieces. But just a name that I'm watching, because I didn't think he'd have any remote shot at work this year, but it looks like he might be at least, you know, mixing in for a couple touches. We will see. Reaction to last night's game, Pat. Falcons against the Raiders. Your Raiders sadly could not pull this game out. I
mean, sadly?
I'm sure you're probably thrilled. Understandably so. But the big conclusion from this game, and there was actually another little update on this shortly before we came on, Kirk Cousins needs to go, man. That was a layup game if you are any sort of competent at the quarterback position.
That's all they did was they made a layup.
Thankfully,
that's all they needed to do.
The Atlanta Falcons they almost blew the game. Let's talk about that first of all. They somehow almost blew a game to the Las Vegas Raiders on the last drive of the game. And this was, I think, my favorite stat of the game, just to illustrate Kirk Cousins' incompetence. I saw a stat. The Falcons had 1st and 10 24 times in that game, Pat. They ran the ball 23 times. They did not throw on first down basically at all, because that is how little they trusted Kirk Cousins. And to me, that's where this becomes a real discussion, because now, the piece of news that came out just before we came on the show is that Raheem Morris has declined to name a starting quarterback for Week 16. And outside of that, Pat, I just want to read you what he was quoted as saying, because it is the most word-vomity, coach speak, I don't want to tell you what I'm actually thinking thing I've ever seen. So he declined to answer who his quarterback would be against the Giants. This is what Raheem Morris said. I think we've got to go through the process. I think you guys are catching me at a different moment in time than we've normally been. We've had more time. We're still looking into those things and doing the things that we go through, that we do as an organization, just in general. That man could not have said more words to say nothing.
That man's a professional yapper.
That could not have been more nothing if he tried. And to me, it really suggests that there's a chance Michael Penix starts this next week. And it, like, again, the play calling alone, Pat, indicates that to me, because this is beyond you're calling a normal game plan and he's playing poorly, but you're going to try to get past it kind of thing. With that stat I gave you, they don't trust their quarterback to throw the ball. You can't play that way.
And you know, it's funny because it was a completely different coaching staff, but we were talking about the same thing with Marcus Mariota in Atlanta last year. Like that, he is not throwing the ball at all. And I guess you could expect that of Marcus Mariota, you know, a guy who's pretty much been a backup for a majority of his career and is washed. But we're talking Kirk Cousins here, who just got a humongous contract from this team. Like, this should not be happening to Kirk Cousins at this rate. And we have seen, you know, flashes of, you know, him looking really good, mainly against the Buccaneers, who, as we know, whose defense has not been very good.
Mariota 2 seasons ago, by the way. Last year it was
that was
Ritter.
2 seasons.
They've just done this thing with quarterbacks the last several years of none of them can throw the ball. So,
and like, they're fortunate that they have two really good running backs in Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. 34 carries by running backs. Kirk had 3 himself. 37 rushes last night. And again, you're lucky the Raiders are ass just everywhere. And that's good enough, but Drake London was looking like a stud at one point in the year. Like, I remember we did our rest of season draft, and I took Drake London because there was no reason not to. He got 3 targets last night. Like, is Drake London a set it and forget it option anymore? I don't think he is.
Yeah,
he's lucky he caught that touchdown last night. He goes 3 for 53 in a touchdown. So in a half PPR, that's 12 and a half, 13 points. Like, that's fine, but we're trying to win championships here. And with that unreliable of a quarterback, is it like the only Falcon that we're starting is Bijan Robinson?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think London you're still leaving in your lineup either way, only because he's managing to stay afloat because of just kind of an insane target share for the most part. Last night with 3 targets was absolutely not that. But like the weeks before, 10, 16, 7, 13. So he's getting the targets, which is allowing him to crank out basically these bare minimum fantasy point totals. Because even with those amounts that I just listed, like in that 16 target game, Pat, he brought in 9 of them for 86 yards. That's 12.8 fantasy points in half PPR. If you actually had a quarterback that could push the ball downfield and was better than league average, a guy as good as Drake London is turning 16 targets into 25 plus. Like, you're just not getting enough quality targets at this point from Kirk Cousins. And I was saying this last night while I was watching the game. Like, I know it's hard as a franchise, as the Atlanta Falcons, to basically be in the playoff hunt and go with a youth movement, but you kind of have to. You're not getting anywhere with Kirk Cousins.
The fact that they are only 1 game out of the NFC South is insane, and it just goes to show that imagine what they could be doing with good quarterback play. They could be running away with this division with good quarterback play here. Like, we've seen Drake London look really good. Like, we know what he can do when he's getting quality targets, and Bijan is advertised. He is as good as, he kind of had that quiet period at the beginning of the year, but he has just turned the Jets on and has been fantastic. You have to try something else here. Well, they had lost 5 in a row before, and you just kind of stumble into a win against the literal worst team in football, barely. How can you leave that with any amount of confidence? And honestly, no matter the situation, whether they were where they are now, 1 game out of the playoffs, or if they were awful and going with a youth movement, I think you have to give Michael Penix a shot here, because it can't be much worse. Like, they are squandering so much talent here when they have a top 10 talent in Michael Penix just sitting there waiting. Like, I think you have to.
Yeah, and look, here's the important thing is there's going to be people out there that are like, you can't, in the midst of a playoff race, go to a rookie quarterback and make that kind of change. To which I would say you're lucky to still be in this playoff race. And look, there's absolutely a pretty good chance that Michael Penix Jr. isn't good enough to lead this team to the playoffs or through a playoff run either. But at this point, you have to try the thing that you don't know versus going with the guy that has a dead arm and that at best is going to get bounced in the first round of the playoffs if you somehow manage to squeak your way in there. But they have 3 weeks left in the regular season now, their most important stretch of the season. I know it's scary to try to go with a rookie quarterback and go to that unknown, but it's better than the known of a guy who is, Pat, it's beyond just like making bad decisions. It's making bad decisions. He looks like he has no juice on the ball. He looks completely and utterly washed. And
I mean,
you got to do something.
Was his first touchdown in how many games? Like, what he had gone like 0 to 8 touchdowns to picks. I saw before the game. I didn't see how many that sample size was, but like, that's awful. Like, that's not just like a slump. Like, that is actively terrible quarterback play on a team that should be a playoff team in theory.
Yeah, it was his first touchdown since week 9 against the Cowboys, where he had 3 touchdowns and 0 interceptions in that game. Since then, he, including last night, 1 touchdown to 9 interceptions. So, yeah, this is... Look, again, they need to take a step back, realize they're lucky to still be in position to make the playoffs. And again, is it likely that a rookie Michael Penix Jr. making his first starts, goes crazy and leads you to a surprise playoff run and a Super Bowl appearance? No, it's not likely, but you at least give yourself a chance for some magic versus a completely wilted season, which is what
we
Cousins
know
is hunting
Kirk
towards.
Cousins is not going to do that. Like, we know, like, they are tanking.
Yeah.
They are tanking with him at the helm. You're very well right. Michael Penix probably won't do it either, but, like, there's a chance. Like, there is no chance that Kirk Cousins, if anything, this team could stumble backwards into the 4 seed and get rocked by one of the NFC North teams, either the Lions, Packers, or Vikings there in the first round. Like, in a home game too. Like, there's just no, you can't keep going.
It's bad, but I do think, I mean, Pat, I think we're trending toward it, that Michael Penix Jr., I think probably starts this week. If Raheem Morris is actively word salading and not naming a quarterback, I think there's a reason for that. And, would we have been surprised if he said Kirk's our guy? No, we wouldn't have. And so I think the fact that he didn't say that says a lot to me.
It's
so
not
we'll
Raheem Morris, this is his second go at head coaching. Maybe it's just not his thing if this decision making doesn't go. But I agree completely. The fact that he even left the door open for it, because we've seen coaches be like, "Oh yeah, this guy's our guy," and then they change it on you. The fact that he held the door open in the first place leads me to believe that we'll see Michael Penix this week.
I think this could also be something that comes down from the GM room as well, because Terry Fontenot probably needs to try to save. Is that the name? Am I getting that right? I think that's right. Or am I thinking of somebody else?
Or Arthur's gonna blank
I'm right.
him.
Yeah, no, sorry. I want to make sure I got the name right. Yeah, Terry Fontenot. The Kirk signing happened under his watch, and so I think he needs to show that the Penix pick also happened under his watch. And hey, look, this guy's at least good to try to save his job, because he's now gone through a whirlwind with the Falcons, but he managed to come out still with his job after the Arthur Smith debacle. I don't know if you ride, Kirk the rest of the way and he's terrible and you miss the playoffs, if that guy's job is safe. I really don't think it would be. So I expect to see Michael Penix this Sunday. Hopefully we do. Some other quarterbacks that already got benched, Pat. The Browns have benched Jameis, and the Titans have benched Will Levis. These teams are getting to the point in the year where they are sick of their bad quarterbacks. And look, the Jameis is fun when he's fun, and he's not when he's not. And I also think this could be an effort for the Browns to maybe want to avoid a Jameis good week and improve their draft stock a little bit. Go with
and
go
also
with a little
not
DTR
have to have
action.
As difficult of a conversation next year between him and Deshaun Watson. Even though
The conversation with Deshaun
should,
Watson needs to be, cell block B, buddy, have fun. But
to literally putting him out old Yeller style, So that's the thing. Like, you could be right. It's unfortunate because I think that Jameis sitting zaps a lot of the fantasy value here out of.
Yeah.
Obviously, David
100%.
Njoku didn't play. You look at Cedric Tillman should be back this week. Jerry Jeudy has been a fucking revelation, man. That guy's been feeding families. That takes a big hit as well. So, we'll see what DTR can do. Obviously, he has a little bit of value himself because he can run the ball, but obviously this is the right decision for the Browns, who Jameis has just been bad Jameis the last couple weeks. So you might as well just give the kid a shot here.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking, I assume, to even less teams still in their playoff races after last week. And so if we're talking to the, 2 or 4 teams remaining in your league's playoffs, and you guys are considering starting Dorian Thompson-Robinson, please seek help. If
you're playing in the losers bracket to try to avoid the punishment, DTR might be the guy to pick up.
He could be the guy. He could be the guy there. I will agree with that. And yeah, the Titans benching Will Levis, going with Mason Rudolph. We've kind of already seen this back and forth all year. I don't think it really changes much. It honestly might slightly improve the stock of the Titans pass catchers, but overall, this is just Will Levis. Get ready to learn bench, buddy. Like this year and next and the year after, and maybe in a team other than the Tennessee Titans. But we'll see what happens with.
Seems like a very big possible Sam Darnold destination if he does not stay in Minnesota.
Man, that would be interesting. Yeah, I don't know how I'd feel about that. If that feels like a crash and burn situation.
Is Brian Callahan enough of an offensive mind as opposed to Kevin O'Connell? He might
I
be
don't think
close
so.
to it. Like I don't know. That's the thing. Like my dad Raiders fan wants Sam Darnold, and I'm like they can't sustain him. Like he's gonna need some kind of system. I think at least in Tennessee, there's a chance that there's a system building there. They just don't have anything in Will Levis right now. But yeah, Levis is just bad. Not a good year for the class of 2023 quarterbacks here.
No, not a good year.
Are we leaving the year with like Bryce Young looking the best? Like at least right now, like this minute right now.
Yeah,
CJ Stroud has been. We'll talk about CJ Stroud probably in our
we sure
Busts
will.
of the Year segment.
We sure
of the
will.
year.
Yeah, we absolutely will. Yeah, that's a good point. Patrick Mahomes also went down. It feels like he just kind of has a bi-weekly ankle injury that looks serious-ish in the moment, and then you also know that he's ultimately going to be completely fine. He even practiced in full today.
He's a goon too. Like he's psychotic too.
Patrick
After
Mahomes,
that Super Bowl when his ankle was like bigger than two ankles. Like
Patrick Mahomes and Steph Curry have so many parallels that it kind of drives me crazy. Like
does
they're
Mahomes
both.
hate low-income housing?
I don't even know what that's referencing, and I don't like it. I'll look that up later. But Mahomes and Curry, like, I would argue Mahomes is more so now than Curry is now. But like, face of the league type of players, multiple championships, changed how the sport is really played. Also, both chronic ankle injuries. It's just really funny to me that they both are kind of the same thing, but in different sports. And yeah, Mahomes got one of his many ankle injuries again. Seems like he's probably going to be okay, even if he doesn't play this week. Not expected to be something that affects them long term. So we'll see how that goes. Real quick, figured we should check in, Pat, on our league winners that we selected for last week. We did a little draft of players that we thought could help you win your league going forward the rest of the year.
Much like everything else with this podcast, mid.
Had a big pile of mid. And look, some of it wasn't our fault. Some of it was our fault. So through my picks, first of all, Adam Thielen, 7.6 points. Affected, I think, by, I believe it was Jalen Coker's first game back.
The Cokeheads returned this week.
The Cokeheads rose again, and it definitely hurt Thielen's production. 7.6, not a complete catastrophe, but definitely not what you're looking for. Meanwhile, the Cokeheads, 4 catches for 110 yards and a touchdown, mostly coming on what I believe was an 84-yard touchdown in that game. So, yeah, look, the Thielen train may be stalled a little bit because of the return of Coker. My bad. Jalen Waddle kind of did not qualify.
Might be talking about him too.
Played some of that game, but ended up with a goose egg because he left with injury. Anthony Richardson, this is one where I'll have to take the L here. Although, granted, I drafted him with the idea that the Broncos game wasn't going to be his crowning moment, because that's obviously a great
takes
defense.
Is one really big game from Anthony Richardson, and we've seen that he can do it.
I wasn't expecting a huge game from him against the Broncos. It was more so the rest of the year, the next 2 games against the Titans and the Giants that I was advocating for, because against the Broncos, he only had 13.88 fantasy points, even though he rushed for a touchdown, but adding 2 interceptions on only 172 passing yards, not what the doctor ordered. I would still fire him up the next 2 weeks if you have, otherwise mediocre quarterback options. I would still not let this sway me. I will stick by that one. Rico Dowdle, he came through for the most part, just didn't find the end zone, but still had a season high in rushing yards, yet another 100-yard game, 25 carries for 149 yards. Didn't add a touchdown, didn't add any receptions, which hurts a little bit, but he still had a nice game for you. If you
I think his over-under for carries was like 15.5, and he fucking obliterated. It's about time they're giving him the carries that, he deserves. And, maybe they'll go in next year thinking he could be the guy. I'm sure there's going to be a lot better options out there. Hello, Ashton Genty. But yeah, Rico Dowdle is, I've got him on one of my playoff teams, and I'm confidently starting him this week.
Yep, and then last but not least, the boy, Stone Smart. Stone Cold.
I saw him catch a ball, and I almost turned off the TV.
Stone Cold, Stone Smart. So did he must have had a fumble or something, because he had 5 catches for 50 yards. Yeah, so he must have had a fumble because that would have been 7.5 and half PPR. Honestly, 5 catches for 50 yards on 6 targets, like in a vacuum for a waiver tight end, is really good.
That's not bad. No,
that's really good.
No, that's not bad at all. I put him on our waiver list again this week.
Yeah, I still don't hate the spot start if you don't have a tight end, but that's certainly not league-winning numbers. Pat's picks, Jacoby Myers, 8.4. Again,
he didn't have a catch until the fourth quarter. No Raider wide receiver had a catch until the fucking fourth quarter somehow.
I mean, Desmond Ridder was throwing him the ball. David Njoku was a DNP. He did not end up playing this week.
He might have been my best pick.
DJ Moore had 11. Not league winner-esque, but, double digits. Isaac Guerrero, 9.5, but got hurt again. And then Tony Pollard, 8.5. That is not, we're not league winners.
Yeah, I think everyone just, had a collective aneurysm seeing Tajay Spears at the goal line. They're getting a rushing touchdown, even though Pollard still dominated the touches, even with Spears healthy. So that was frustrating.
Tajay Spears went absolutely dumb for just no reason. All right, let's move into Mount Studmore and Mount Bustmore for the week before we get into our overall
Josh Allen.
our overall busts for the fantasy season, which we will get to in the segment after that. Pat and I are going to draft 5 each, the biggest busts of the year, just to go over the absolute most disappointing fellas of the season, and there are a good amount. But Mount Studmore, got to put him on here for a second straight week because he has once again done something that no other quarterback has ever done in the history of fantasy football, and that is Josh Allen. He went for 41.28 points, becoming the first ever quarterback to put up back-to-back 40-plus point games. Obviously, last week he had 51. This guy is single-handedly dragging people to fantasy titles.
I saw a tweet from about a quarterback from 1950 who also did something like this, and his name was hilarious, and I don't remember who tweeted it. I'm gonna find this somehow. All right, keep talking, keep yapping.
Hey, you go for it. Next member I have of Mount Studmore is the quarterback that faced off alongside him or across from Josh Allen, Jared Goff. And this is a weird one because I don't know how many people had the sack or not even sack, a clairvoyance to start Jared Goff against the Buffalo Bills. Goff's had a good year. He's been good in spots, but he hasn't been any.
Too. He's always better at home.
Yeah, he hasn't blown anybody away, but also the Bills' defense has been good this year. 41.01 points for Jared Goff. His best game of the year, probably his best game of his career, fantasy-wise, if I had to guess. So I got to put him on Mount Studmore as well if anybody did start him. Devontae Adams, 38.3. I know I mentioned at the end of our League Winners segment last week that I almost picked him because of the, ever improving chemistry again with Aaron Rodgers. Seems like they're kind of refinding what they used to have, and I should have drafted him in our League Winners draft. My overall selections would have looked a lot better because he continued just going absolutely ballistic. 38.3 in half PPR.
I like too many tweets.
And then finishing off with Mike Evans, 32.4 points, rounding out our Mount Studmore. But I have to acknowledge.
Our buddy Connor, who weeks ago said anyone interested in Mike Evans' possible playoff league winner?
Yeah.
Somebody bumped that. Nobody took the bait there on it, and somebody bumped that message last week.
He was trying to trade
him.
He was trying to trade him at our league's trade deadline 5 weeks ago, and nobody bit. Nobody really made a good offer, and they probably are wishing they did now. Some other huge performances here. Look, those are the official members of Mount Studmore. Obviously, only 4 names allowed on there, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention these guys because as we get further and further down the year, Pat, I think it's just, I don't know if defenses are tired or what's going on, but it seems like we're getting a higher quantity of just these massive performances. Lamar Jackson, 36.1 points. Amon-Ra St. Brown, obviously helped by, the Jared Goff 40 bomb, went for 30.3 of his own. Aaron Rodgers went for 30.06. James Conner, 28.3. Jalen Hurts, 28.1. Baker Mayfield, 28.02. And Brian Thomas Jr., 27.5. And that's leaving out plenty of other guys who went for, well over 20 in half PPR. Just a week for chunk points if you needed them. There are a lot of guys out there that were able to give you a large amount of points.
There was a lot of points getting thrown out there this week. Hopefully they were on playoff teams.
Yeah. Now, Mount Bustmore, there were some big names here that let you down when it mattered most, so hopefully you had some of the guys on Mount Studmore or in the honorable mentions at the very least.
I know you've already made a 2 girls 1 cup joke before in Busts Anonymous, but you've got to do something. You've got to do something for... I know he's not first on your list, but Cooper Kupp, In my guillotine league, I had him this week. So I knew Thursday night that it was Jover. Because that fucking bum. I got guillotined by like 80 points.
Oh,
like
dear.
everyone in my league dropped like 150. I don't think I broke 80 in full PPR. And it all started with Cooper Kupp. So at least Sunday, I barely had to watch football. I didn't need to give a shit. But like,
Band-Aid got
I
ripped
watched
off.
that man. I watched that man get cardio, which like
Yeah.
great for the body and everything. Puka's a fucking stud. But like, like the whole thing with Cooper Kupp is that it's all him and Puka, and the floor is so good. The ceiling may not be there every week, but the floor is so good. For the floor to literally be zero, shocking. Even against the 49ers, shocking.
At this point, my mind on every player goes to just what are we going to do with them next year and where are they going to be. Cooper Kupp's going to be an interesting one. Should he
also
still
depends
be in
what
the
team
Rams.
he's on, though.
Yeah,
is the
but
biggest thing.
Like assuming, let's just assume status quo for the hell of it, right? Same Matthew Stafford, Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, all there with the Rams. Like, where are we drafting Cooper Kupp? I feel like name value, he's going to be one of those guys that gets pushed up because of casuals, I guess. But it's like, I don't know what to actually expect from him anymore other than occasional goose eggs and bad performances. Derrick Henry only had 6.7 points in a week where Lamar Jackson was just firing the ball through the air all game. So if you had Derrick Henry carry you to your fantasy playoffs, he abandoned
Might
you.
have carried you right out of it.
Yeah, he abandoned you when you needed him most, which is funny because this is kind of opposite of what we're used to with Derrick Henry, right? As the season goes on, as things get colder, Derrick Henry's always known as being the guy that the Titans would lean on in this portion of the year, and he would really just punish defenses. But we're now looking at a pretty bad performance against the Giants, Pat, and honestly, pretty mid performances for the last 5 weeks.
Yeah, he has really not. He was playing some godlike football at the beginning of the year, and
I mean, MVP conversations. He and
at
Saquon.
At the very least, at the very best, excuse me, he's been underwhelming the last few weeks.
Yeah, ever since week 10 against the Bengals, he's gone for 13.6, 10.5, 14.0, 12.6, which is enough for you to not sound the alarm bells. That's why we haven't really talked about, Derrick Henry's falling off the second half of the year. That topic hasn't really come up because it's always been just enough. This was kind of a new low. And you look before that Bengals game of 13.6 in week 10, he was dropping nukes, man. I mean, 25.8, 14.2 is fine. 24.7, 25.2, 16.1, 34.4, 29.9. That's going all the way back to week 3. He was nuclear for the first half of the year. And now, it's fallen off, and they're going against the Steelers this week. You're not benching him, obviously, but you got to adjust expectations for Derrick Henry the rest of the way. Speaking of, the other running back we were comparing him to for most of the year, Saquon Barkley, 8.4 points. Not what you're looking for another guy that probably carried you to the playoffs. Yeah, a little banged up. That's probably affecting him. But now it's you probably got to adjust expectations for him going forward too, or at least understand that he might not be able to carry you the way he did for so many weeks. I mean, God, I didn't realize this. From week 9 through 12, 3 of those 4 games, Pat, he went for 30+ in half PPR.
Good Lord.
The one he didn't, he went for 8.3, very similar to his output this week. But, God, this man, the supreme backpack, that dude was carrying you to and through all those games. And now, just questionable, not a great performance, not what you wanted to see. And then Tyreek Hill, 4.6 points. This was a guy that was getting a little bit more on track the last few weeks. I mean, him and Jalen Waddle both were getting on track.
It's just the Jonnu Smith show, man.
Yeah, and it's the
Arthur
Tua
Smith's
kind of
I love
show.
Jonnu Smith, and Mike McDaniel's bet.
Yeah, it's just underwhelming from this Dolphins offense. Not as explosive as you wanted it to be. A little still surprising. I thought Tyreek was getting fully on track. I mean, he was at least from weeks 1 through 7, which obviously a lot of that was with their gaggle of backup quarterbacks. It was single digits every game except for week 1. Then he was 10+ for a while, and then the last 2 weeks were 23.1 and 17.3, getting back to Tyreek Hill numbers. And now just a 4.6 big poo on the bed dud, and it kind of sums up his season, just not able to fully get in gear, Tyreek Hill or this Dolphins offense. All right, enough of the bus of the week. It is time for the bust of the year with our
Lord have
overall
mercy,
bust
I'm
draft.
about to bust.
You know, I think we got to wait a couple weeks for like overall fantasy football awards because these next 2 weeks do still matter. But the reason I felt comfortable doing this is I don't think anything's really going to transpire that takes any of these guys out of bust territory, even if they go nuclear, because they were still bad for 15 weeks out of the year. And we expect, you know, nothing to really change there. So these are the biggest overall busts of the fantasy football season. Pat and I will go back and forth, quote unquote, drafting them one by one to create the ultimate bust team, I guess. And it's just an avenue to talk about what went wrong for some of these guys and maybe what we can learn from for next year. So, Pat, you have the honors of the first overall pick in this draft.
You know, when I was looking at this, first of all, I don't know how big your list is, but my list is like 15 deep.
Mine's pretty
And
close.
like obviously 10 total will be picked. A lot of guys, and there were a couple guys obviously that didn't live up to their ADP because of injury. And you know, you can't really control that. That's not really on them. But fuck that. Christian McCaffrey is the bust of the year. And I'll tell you why. We were just straight up lied to.
Yeah.
By, you know, and again, you know, Kyle Shanahan and Christian McCaffrey, they don't have to tell us shit.
Yeah.
But like, for him to get ruled out on Monday night of week 1 and it be conveyed as a surprise inactive, and then to miss 10 weeks, where all we had in the preseason was that, oh, you know, he's having some calf problems, not a big deal, yada, yada, yada. The number 1 pick in nearly every single draft you're drafting in. For that to happen, for him to just miss 10 weeks, come back and look pretty good. The second injury, I'm taking that out of it because that shit happens. But I am talking him, you know, I took him first overall in the league and my team was fucked from that moment on.
Yeah.
And, you know, had they just been, you know, had he just hurt his calf week 1, had he taken his first carry of the year and hurt his calf, we're not having this conversation. Shit happens. For it just to be as infuriating as possible for this situation to be. This is the ultimate exception here to the no injuries rule because you cannot have a bust of the year conversation without the 101 Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, I understand totally where you're coming from. Normally in these sorts of things, we do exclude guys that got hurt, but and this is still not, you know, an indictment toward McCaffrey or anything like that, obviously. But yeah, I don't think you're wrong for that, given the magnitude of the situation.
The circumstances too. It's just how everything went down and then how severe it was. It's absolutely maddening. And then to rub the salt in the wound for him to come back and start looking good. He looked really good that game where he got hurt too. And then for him to just go down like that again, and just on the off chance that you made the playoffs with him, just another absolute punch to the gut.
Yeah, it definitely stinks when your fantasy season gets absolutely railed before it even gets off the ground.
Before it even starts, yeah.
For something that, you know, information that we could have been privy to and just were not. So, yeah, definitely a brutal one. I'm going to go with, look, a lot of these guys are guys who it didn't necessarily shock me that they busted. Or I should say, a lot of them did surprise me that they busted. This is one that I kind of saw coming to an extent. I mentioned the possibility of it at the very least. And so because of that, I'm going to pick him. And it's Marvin Harrison Jr. This is a guy that as the draft sort of process, you know, fantasy draft process went along, I kind of soured on a little more over time because I'm a guy that, as you know, Pat, I try to draft paranoid. That's my thing that I like to do. I don't like to spend super high picks on guys that are complete unknowns. And despite all the hype and all the logistics that told you Marvin Harrison Jr. was going to be a slam dunk pick because he was a all world sort of talent receiver going to a team that had plenty of targets up for grabs with
so many targets up for grabs
with a more than competent quarterback. Like Kyler Murray is, we thought, a better quarterback than what you normally get when you're a guy getting drafted number 4 overall to a team. Normally that kind of team has just absolute dog shit at the quarterback position. Everything lined up great, and yet still there was something in my head that told me, like, this is a rookie. You just don't know. And that's true to a degree for any player you draft in fantasy. You don't know anything for sure, but it scared me off of him enough. And now looking back in hindsight, I'm so glad that it did, because Pat, if I drafted Marvin Harrison Jr., you'll remember this. I think I mentioned this on the pod too. I chose my draft position in our league partially because I wanted to draft Marvin Harrison in the second round. I took like a slightly later pick than I could have because I was like, I want to get the earlier pick on the come around because I think people are going to love Marvin and whatever. Thank God I didn't end up sticking to that. I would have gone max 3 and 10 if I spent my second pick on this guy instead of Devon Achane. So Marvin Harrison Jr., wide receiver 28 right now in half PPR, despite being drafted as wide receiver 9 or so.
I've got it here.
It was around
9.
that.
Yes.
9. That's what I thought. Okay. Just a brutal year for the guy, and I hope things get better.
And for it to just be so infuriating, the fact that we saw him go apeshit. Even that first quarter against the Rams, where he caught 2 touchdowns, making these absurd catches. The talent is undeniable. It's just the involvement in the offense is infuriating. And, I moved my draft pick in ours, and I didn't even think about Marvin Harrison because I just never thought I would get him. Looking back, I would have rather taken Puka there and had him be out for as long as he had and then have him come back. Like, that would have been a better pick, because at least then you're not starting Marvin Harrison every week and being let down, knowing what he's capable of and seeing what the Cardinals offense is capable of too, seemingly when they choose to be. Mm-hmm. But just absolutely infuriating. And the fact that I got him off, traded him for Chase Brown, is insane. Like, looking back, I drafted Drake London in the 3rd round. That sure, Drake London was resoundingly better than Marvin Harrison was. And there's just no reason for it to happen. I get he's a rookie, whatever. We haven't seen a wide receiver prospect like him in a long time. To see that is just infuriating.
What do you think the lesson is here? Like, how do we avoid this going forward? Is it as simple as don't draft a rookie receiver that high? Because second round, we talked all the time about how the ADP was incredibly high, and it was a result of so many guys putting up that level of numbers in their rookie year to where it was like, oh, I should have just taken that guy in the second. Guys who, like Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson in their rookie years, even Puka Nacua obviously was never considered to be drafted that high, but we've seen what rookie receivers can do, and that the learning curve isn't maybe as crazy as we thought. But now, the one time we actually do it gets fucked up.
In this situation was so hard to predict, because you look at Malik Neighbors, for example. Going into the year, it was that he's playing in a terrible offense with a terrible quarterback, but he might get literally every target, and we saw that for a while. Yep. That's what I mean. We saw both sides of that. With Marvin Harrison, we didn't see that Drew Pretzing just hates him, because we had no idea, because they haven't had a good they didn't have a good wide receiver last year to ignore the way they ignored Marvin Harrison this year. So it's like, how in this case, how could we have predicted that it was going to be this bad? Maybe the ADP was a bit festive, but for it to just be this, and every week he's like, oh yeah, we got to get Marvin the ball. We got to get Marvin the ball. And they never got Marvin the fucking ball.
Yeah.
And I'm sure when he did, he was riding people's benches where he belonged. Absolutely infuriating.
I'll be curious to see how this affects rookie receivers next year, because I mean, I don't know how many receivers.
I guess Travis Hunter. But
well, yeah, we're gonna have Travis Hunter, who's gonna be his own conversation, because I have no idea how that's even gonna work.
That's gonna be fun.
But we've got guys. We've got guys like Tet McMillan who have a very high pedigree. If he goes to the right place, it'll be interesting. I don't think we're going to have anybody that's going to push for second round. So this is probably something we can at least table for now as far as drafting rookie receivers super high in fantasy. But definitely sucks that the one time we were finally like, all right, we've seen it enough from rookie receivers with high pedigrees. They always seem to work out. Let's just draft one close to his ceiling so we don't miss out.
And the talent is still there. Marvin Harrison is still going to be a really good player, potentially elite wide receiver in this league. It just might not happen with this coaching staff in Arizona. In just by far the weirdest team in the league this year, the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah. All right, Pat. Go with your second
I'm shocked you didn't pick this guy. And again, I said we don't do injury here. This guy did not get injured, but someone very, very important. I was in one league where McCaffrey didn't go first, and that was brilliant in hindsight. Except the guy took Tyreek Hill.
Yeah.
Who
thought about it.
Again, here's the thing. You can't predict the injury to Tua. But that said, when you are picking the guy, either wide receiver 1 or 2, going third in your draft at worst, it shouldn't fucking matter who's throwing them the ball. Like, we've seen CD Lamb have some good weeks with Cooper Rush at quarterback. For Tyreek Hill's production to crater, like, he was borderline unstartable. But, well, I'd argue he was unstartable, but the problem was he was Tyreek Hill. And all it took was one deep ball, and it was crazy. But the quarterback play in Miami outside of Tua was so bad. And again, you can't predict that. You can't predict injury. But when you are taking a player that high, they need to be injury-proof, situation-proof, where no matter what the situation is, they are going to produce because of their talent, and that's why they're going so high. So what he finished here as wide receiver 20 overall and 33 on a per-game basis, where he was being drafted at worst as the wide receiver 2 or 3 in drafts. You just can't have that.
Yeah, and it's Tyreek Hill's a guy, I've been weary of for a little bit because you know how I am about players approaching their 30s.
Bran hates old people. If you're old, he hates you. Grandma, you're listening, Bran hates you.
Love you, Grandma. But that was not the issue with Tyreek Hill. It was strictly this offense taking on an entirely new identity this year, and whether it was because of offensive line changes or whatever it may have been that they decided – it might just be defenses dictating, hey, you're not going deep, like how that's really happened across the league, minimizing deep shots to guys like Tyreek Hill. Whatever it was, it ruined his season and ruined him as a top 3 for the most part consensus pick in fantasy drafts. He did not even remotely provide you with that level of production. So yeah, I definitely thought about him with my pick there. I just think Marv was almost more unpredictably irritating.
Yes. Oh my God, because it didn't need to happen. It did not need. There was no injuries. There was no, extenuating circumstances.
And it was a week-to-week thing too. It was a roller coaster with Marv because he would have that big game and then suck. Tyreek, it was pretty. Like, once you realized that this wasn't the year for Tyreek, you could kind of predict, like, he was going for 10, 10, 10, 10. Like, it was pretty consistent. With that said, with my next pick here, I am going to go with a guy that I didn't like coming into the year, and he proved me right also, and it's Travis Etienne. Travis Etienne, I believe, finished as a top 10 fantasy running back last season. He was awesome on what we thought was, an ascending Jaguars team. Pat, as we sit here right now, yes, Etienne has missed a couple of games here. He's only missed 2 games in full. He's RB 38 in half PPR. Completely unstartable asset. You probably spent a second round pick on Travis Etienne. He went first round.
If you're in our league.
He went first in our league. I mean, look, we thought that was an ambitious pick at the time, but we didn't necessarily think it was.
We poo-pooed the Saquon pick way more than the Etienne pick. We looked like assholes.
Yeah, the Etienne pick. We were surprised, but we were like, it was more of a I don't know why you drafted a guy that we were pretty positive you could have just gotten in the second round, in the first round. That was more of the reaction there. But in most leagues, he was still at least a second round pick, and the guy along with the Jags offense just cratered. Anybody outside of Brian Thomas Jr. and Evan Engram for a little bit.
Brian Thomas has been, had his dud games. He's more of a big play kind of guy, boom or bust kind of guy.
Well, he's been a freak lately, to give him his credit.
He's by far been the best player there. But
the
even
targets,
him,
the targets the last 3 weeks, 14, 12, and 10, and putting up, he just put up 27.5.
He was never someone in a weekly guillotine draft that I considered drafting just because of how bad this Jags offense was. And Etienne's the guy that paid the price the most. And the fact that we did see more of Tank Bigsby than, we did last year. Because there were talks about that, will Tank Bigsby be up here? But you've got to think there's going to be sweeping changes in Jacksonville next year. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence.
The fact Doug Peterson's still there is just like I said.
They're
fascinating.
They just don't want to do it in the middle of the season after the whole Urban Meyer debacle, probably. But just incredibly disappointing from an offense that again we thought had a chance to be pretty good. This was a team that we thought might have had a shot in the AFC South, but the downfall of the Jags has just been astronomical.
Yeah. All right. Third pick, Pat. Who we taking off the board?
All right, here. This guy. I'm trying to see if he's missed any games this year. I think he's missed some. No, not really. He's played 14 games. What is this, week 16? So yeah, he's only missed one game. All this guy needs is the football. As a football zips right through his hands, it's Deebo Samuel, man. Again, to see this 49ers offense still be this good, where Jordan Mason was carrying teams, where, we've seen Isaac Guerrero be solid, McCaffrey had some good weeks, Jawan Jennings has looked very good. Brandon Ayuk probably would be in this draft had he not gotten hurt as early as he did. But Deebo, we kind of talked about, was that big year an outlier? And it was. It just straight up was. Yep. He is not getting the carries that he was that were sustaining those stats. We all kind of thought Brandon Ayuk was the better wide receiver in the first place. It seems Jawan Jennings is a better wide receiver than him as well. What he was going at wide receiver 13, 26.5 ADP. Okay, yeah, if you were doing that, you deserve this. But wide receiver 48 overall, 55 points per game. That's not even a wide receiver 4. That is terrible, useless on a team that, even with their bad record, has still been a good offense. Terrible.
Yeah, and so, the big year that we are referring to was, 2021, where I believe he finished as wide receiver 3 overall. He had 1,405 receiving yards and 6 touchdowns, as well as 365 rushing yards and 8 rushing touchdowns. I think the reason Deebo still was going this high, years later, is last year, Pat, it wasn't that good, but it was he was wide receiver 12 in half PPR. And that was what people were drafting for when they were drafting him. His ADP was still well below wide receiver 12. So people were understanding there was probably going to be a bit of a drop as he gets older and all that. And they still thought they could get some value out of him if he was wide receiver 12 last year. But I think he's just been a victim of, touchdown variance and also just a less productive offense overall, because where are the Niners at?
It still has been, yeah.
In points per game here, the Niners looks like right in the middle. I'm not going to count all the way down, but I'm pretty sure they're 16th in the league in points per game. Last season, the Niners were 3rd. So that's less touchdowns to go around. Yeah. And when you're a guy that relies on them and no one's getting them, you're not getting them.
And George Kittle's been a monster. George Kittle has taken a lot of the production from this team. And I think part of the reason he was going so high too, Deebo, was that we weren't sure about the fucking Brandon Ayuk situation. God, I have not missed talking about him. But we weren't sure. We were saying, if they trade him, then Deebo, is going to do this and everything. Fucking Ricky Pearsall got shot. And then it's just...
It's been a bad year for the Niners.
The guy, I think, it's going to say, where does this guy go next year?
I ain't touching Deebo Samuel. No matter what
I think the guy's just washed.
Oh, Pat, we got some breaking news. Coach Raheem Morris has named Michael Penix Jr. the starting quarterback moving forward.
Like you said, we love it. Love it. At least they're going for it. They realize they can't do what they're doing right now. Yeah, we talked about it.
We don't have anything to say.
Yeah, we said everything.
Thank goodness. Okay, next pick in the bust draft. I think this guy probably slid a little bit here because I don't really know why, but it is supposed league winner, Pat, supposed QB1 overall potential, Anthony Richardson.
Dad stole my next pick.
As a guy that I'm advocating for you guys to start over the next 2 weeks, that's independent. That's independent of this because he has come back, he has looked better, and he has good matchups the next 2 weeks. But as far as the course of the season, man, went about as bad as you could possibly think for Anthony Richardson. Not only did they not lean on his legs and let him run the ball and let him do the thing that made people advocate for him to possibly be QB1 in fantasy, they made him pass the ball and he wasn't good at it. He was historically bad completion percentage, and it was just the exact opposite of what we hoped for with Anthony Richardson. And I think obviously the days are over of hoping for him to be a top 5 guy in terms of fantasy football. He's going to be a fringe starter for probably the rest of his career unless there's some crazy development. Yeah. And I think maybe the guy that I am honestly, the guy that I'm most disappointed in so far that we've drafted. The Marv thing stinks, but Richardson was the guy that I really thought and wanted.
And with Richardson, it was just, he was bad. Real life, the guy, he got benched in real life and it was justified. That's really all you need to say. He's the only guy of these quarterbacks that we're going to mention here that it got to that bad where not only because there's a couple other guys who were good quarterbacks that didn't produce fantasy wise, he just wasn't good at all, and there is no real reason for it. With another year under Shane Steichen, the Colts have just been resoundingly disappointing.
Yep.
And I mean, I'm not going to pick Jonathan Taylor or Michael Pittman, but they are on my list. They are on my list. I'm not going to, but they are on my list.
All right, fourth pick, seventh overall pick, Pat. Who are we taking?
This guy did not have the expectations of some of these other people, and I'm going to try not to turn this into an somewhat unrelated rant, but this player was useless. Like, we are talking one of the only guys that was being drafted like as a flex guy that has been absolutely useless. You know who he is. It's Zamir White.
Yeah.
Where, I had the Zamir White drum at one point in the summer where I thought this was going to happen. I soured a bit before the year started, but
thankfully
we saw this coming. We saw all the odds. I kind of thought it was going to be the Raiders were going to have some energy under Antonio Pierce. They love running the ball. He looked good last year at the end of the year when he had the opportunities. And the Raiders are just fucking miserable. Their offensive line was in shambles. They have no quarterback play. The coach is lifeless. He needs to go. Again, that's where I'm not trying to get off topic here. I tweeted about it today. Go check it out if you want. Follow me while you're at it, at PJ Gustafson. But it has just been to the point where, like, Alexander Madison has supplanted him, and then Sincere McCormick, whatever that is, because Zamir White is just bad. Like, he is just straight up not good. And even though he only got drafted as the RB23, that's an RB2. That is still an RB2. That is still a guy that is being drafted as a starter. For him to finish wide receiver 72 overall and points per game. He didn't even have any spike games in there. Awful. Awful, awful, awful. And it just sums up the miserable fucking team that is the Las Vegas Raiders.
I think you nailed it. I don't think there's a lot more to say. I am going to go with a running back as well, who was drafted even before Zamir White and who has been equally useless, I would say. Guy that we knew there was some regression coming, but we didn't know how much, and it's Raheem Mostert. Raheem Mostert, after a year...
I didn't even have him on my list. See, I don't have any more running backs except Jonathan Taylor. I'm like, who's he picking?
Look, after a year where he had however the fuck many touchdowns he had, like 23, we adjusted. We knew that Devon Achane was going to be the most productive back in this backfield, or at least we thought that. But we still thought Raheem Mostert was going to be a guy that, got goal line touches mixed in, and this was going to be a Montgomery Gibbs sort of situation, just a lighter version of that. Well, with Tua falling off and not being... Actually, I can't even say that because Mostert was also hurt for most of that stretch. With the Dolphins' offense just being less explosive this year, Mostert has been...
most hurt, though.
Mostert seems to have he's washed. He's been affected by not just the offense being bad, but he's also been incredibly inefficient with the touches he is getting.
Finally happened.
It's crazy how fast it can happen, man. And this is why I'm paranoid about old players. 1 year, and you are cooked. You are cooked. That's why I'm so hesitant to draft guys at this age. And I was worried, or I should say I'm happy I didn't end up having him available in the round I intended to take him in, because I think it was like the 5th round, and our boy Austin took Raheem Mostert. I was mad in the moment, but then as the year went on, I was
I wanted him too, because he and I zero RB'd together.
Even
as I was looking for Raheem Mostert there, and thank fuck.
Even as an
fucking Jerome
owner,
Ford might have been better.
Yeah, so that ended up working out. So I'm going with Mostert.
Yeah, I think next year, obviously, Devon Achane all aboard, and we'll see Jalen Wright get a lot more, but Mostert's just
I'll be curious about that backfield next year, just because Achane's
they could also bring someone in.
Achane's been so ineffective between the tackles, but he's such a dynamic player. Right, I know, so that's what I'm saying. It's like, if they don't add anyone to the backfield, Achane to the moon, regardless of what happens. But I don't know, I'll be interested to see what they end up doing there.
Yeah. All right, so my last pick here. Quick shout-out to the tight end duo of Travis Kelce and Sam Laporta. Incredibly disappointing. Wide receivers, Tank Dell, Jalen Waddle. Useless. I'm going to take a quarterback here in the last one, and there are two guys that I am talking about here. One of them had slightly higher expectations than the other, but at least he was usable somewhat. At least the last few weeks he has. So I'm not taking Patrick Mahomes here. I'm taking your boy, Bran, CJ Stroud, who QB5, and we both saw this coming. We talked about it all where he's going to need to throw for 50 fucking touchdowns if he wants to live up to QB5.
Is he close? Is he close to that, Pat? He's got to be almost at 50, right? He's got to be like right around the corner. He's right there.
I'm actually scared. What? How many fucking touchdowns? Oh dear, 17. But that's the thing. Like Mahomes, at least like the last few, he had a bad week this week, but like Mahomes was a guy that was at least starting to get you around 20 a game, where it's like, okay. In finish the year, Mahomes QB 12 overall, 10 overall, 12 points per game. Stroud is 25th in points per game. He's not even a QB2. To go at QB5 when you could have gotten a guy like Joe Burrow, who has been everything that people thought CJ Stroud's ceiling could be. When you could have gotten Joe Burrow a couple rounds later. And for the fact that, again, like you weren't even thinking about starting Stroud on a weekly basis. Like that guy belonged on waiver wires.
Yeah. Where
we've seen quarterbacks like Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Jaden Daniels, just backpack fantasy teams to take a quarterback who could not run in an offense that has, again, just been inexplicable at times. Nico Collins has been good and Joe Mixon's been good. CJ Stroud, this is just, we kind of saw this coming. I don't think we saw this coming.
No, I've tried to analyze, the various places where my season went wrong this year. And I think a big portion of it is that two of my starters were Houston Texans, and both of them were the victims of whatever the fuck this offense was. Like Nico Collins has been largely exempt. Obviously, he had the hammy injury that knocked him out, but when he's on the field, he's
very good.
When he's on the field, he's been
Stroud
great.
Loves him.
Joe Mixon's been great, but just this
values.
This whole CJ being constantly pressured and just not routes being unable to develop has obviously it's hurt him, and then it's hurt Tank Dell, who's a guy that needs time for his routes to develop.
Useless.
I just look at it and I'm like, I don't know what I could have done differently to like account for that possibility, because the Texans line last year was good enough at the very least. And so I didn't think it would completely crumble this way. I guess the lesson is to just look a little closer into maybe O-lines. And, CJ finished pretty bad last year, too, because the O-line play started to taper off. So I guess maybe just pay a little closer attention to that and not be so wrapped up in the big picture of, oh, it was a great season. Okay, but what happened toward the end?
It seems, too, that like only Joe Burrow and at times Patrick Mahomes can be those pocket passer type quarterbacks that can really excel in fantasy football. You've got to have some kind of rushing upside.
Yeah. All right. I'm glad you took Stroud. And so for me to round out this draft, I'm going to take a guy who a couple weeks ago probably would have gone a lot higher on here, but he's strung together a couple of good performances over the weeks. Sam Laporta. So yep. Sam Laporta still needs to be on here. He's tight end 10 right now, which is better than it was. But this was still a guy that was drafted as tight end 1. He was drafted with your 3rd round pick, possibly 2nd round pick, and hasn't been worth that all year.
And if you drafted him, it's probably too late for your season when he's finally started to play well, because you're probably 3-10 if Sam Laporta was your 3rd round pick.
Yeah, I mean, tight end 1 overall, Pat, and over the first 4 weeks, he didn't exceed 7.3 points in half PPR. The next 5 weeks, I mean, he mixed in some double digits, but they alternated with complete duds. We're talking like 11.7, 3, 13.8, 3.8, 14.1, 3.4. Like it's been pain from a guy that was, if you drafted him, supposed to be one of the cornerstones of your team. And I think this was another one that we sort of thought was predictable. We thought, not predictable in the sense that he was going to be this bad, but that we didn't like that he was being drafted that high, because the difference between him and the following tight ends just weren't big enough for us to justify it. But even then, we thought he would at least be, we thought he would still be the best tight end in fantasy, and he's been nothing close to that.
That's the thing, yeah. And especially seeing some of the values we could have gotten, like, Mark Andrews was talked about as like this monumental bust. He's turned it around a bit and been like even guys like that, you could have gotten so much better value. Laporta and Kelsey going as high as they were just so monumentally disappointing. Especially like George Kittle. You could have gotten Kittle. You could have gotten Brock Bowers way later. Just with Jonnu Smith, you could have gotten him for free after the draft. To use a pick that high, again, in a somewhat predictable situation, even though he hasn't been god awful, you can't let him off scot-free here.
Yeah. So those are our squads of bust. Pat drafted Christian McCaffrey, Tyreek Hill, Deebo Samuel, Zamir White, and C.J. Stroud. I drafted Marvin Harrison Jr., Travis Etienne, Anthony Richardson, Raheem Mostert, and Sam Laporta. Hopefully, if you're listening, you didn't actually draft any of them in your fantasy drafts, but inevitably, you probably did at least one of them. Just kind of how it goes. But those are your
Twitch stream. Who do you think busted harder? Let us know in the chat.
Yeah, we're not on Twitch. Anyway, those are our busts for the year, and now we will get into our ouchie outlook combined with our waiver targets for the week. So, injuries. We can run through a couple of these pretty quickly. Patrick Mahomes, we mentioned earlier, sprained ankle. Full practice today, probably going to play this week. Doesn't even really change that much anyway. Jalen Hurts, broken finger on his non-throwing hand, played through it and played pretty well. You are starting Jalen Hurts. Don't worry about that. Just worth mentioning. Geno Smith, knee injury. As of right now, the Seahawks are optimistic that he will play. This one does matter because Sam Howell will tank this offense if he is the starter. Sam Howell is a bad quarterback. He cannot handle the constant pressure that the bad Seahawks O-line will put him under. We saw him look like a scared puppy in the limited action he did have this past week. So Geno Smith, optimistic that he's going to play. Keep an eye on it because if you are a JSN owner or a DK owner, you're going to need you could justify benching either of those guys as Sam Howell.
You could justify benching DK Metcalf even if Geno Smith plays. This is true. He's been. I have to start either him or Jaden Reed in one of my playoff teams, so I'll still be starting him, but not fucking ideal.
Yeah, I was going to say, and it'll be hard to justify benching JSN with how good he's been, but like if Sam Howell were to start, I mean, you could convince me if you had a decent bench option. David Montgomery, torn MCL, done for at least the fantasy season. We mentioned the outside possibility that he could come back. So the associated possible pickups would be, I guess, Craig Reynolds and Sione Vaki if you are looking for complete darts. But again, this late in the playoffs, you probably aren't looking for that. It is just Jahmyr Gibbs to
hope you don't need that, yeah.
Alvin Kamara, groin injury, didn't look great. TBD here. This is a big one because Kendre Miller could be a big deal for the rest of the fantasy season.
You know, we still even saw it with Rattler and Hayner. It was all, the running game still was fine, and it was all Kendre Miller. I believe he was the only other running back that got a touch outside of Alvin Kamara. So, he is going to be a tried-and-true lead back in a Clint Kubiak offense. Even as bad as it's been, as bad as the quarterback play has been, there will still be some decent production here. I think if we're talking about the guy this week that is going to win you a championship, it is Kendre Miller.
I would agree. He's probably the number one priority waiver ad.
You know who's number two?
But there's another guy who you could even justify as one. Maybe I prefer Kendre, but this guy's still right there because of Nick Chubb sadly suffering a broken foot, done for the season. This does vault Jerome Ford to the forefront, the Ford front. And Pat is asking the all-important question, will Pat's preseason Jerome Ford boner finally come to fruition 16 weeks later?
I fucking loved the Jerome Ford, man, because I didn't think this Browns offense was going to be the literal epitome of diarrhea. They dumped a Cleveland steamer
They're the Browns, Pat.
They dumped a Cleveland steamer on the field every fucking week. But I will absolutely victory lap this shit if Jerome Ford pops off in the next 2 weeks and say, I told you so. But, again, we talked about the Browns' potential being capped here. They are going with Dorian Thompson-Robinson. If Ford gets the volume, I think he's still a guy that's going to be in flex consideration, but it's not going to be quite as exciting if Jameis was there. I think Miller's the safer play, but I think Ford could potentially still be someone who helps you win here.
Yeah, I mean, It is a volume play. It's they're going to be playing from behind play, and he's going to be the pass catcher of the backs there, so that makes sense. Jalen Waddle, knee injury. He's day to day. He's in question for this week, but has a chance to play, so keep an eye on that one. That could potentially open the door even more for Malik Washington, who got involved this past week with 6 targets. I think if Waddle plays, probably off the radar, but if Waddle doesn't play, Malik Washington, especially after Odell got released and they stopped trying to make him a thing, Malik Washington.
I forgot he was still there.
Malik Washington, as a rookie, comes a little more to the forefront here as the season
Jonnu
winds down.
Smith's supremacy intensifies.
Xavier Legette, groin injury. He's expected to miss Week 16. So this, as we mentioned earlier about Adam Thielen taking a bit of a hit because the cokeheads rose up, Adam Thielen could probably, all right, not doing fake coke on the show.
Oh yeah, that was fake. Yeah.
Adam Thielen probably back in the discussion here if Xavier Legette ends up missing this week, which he is expected to. And you could start Jalen Coker too if you're really feeling freaky. Zach Ertz, concussion. Obviously, don't know how much time that could cause him to miss. But of note, Ben Sinnott ran the most routes of Commanders tight ends, 26 compared to John Bates' 10. Sinnott was buried on the depth chart for most of the year. This was a guy that, based on his talent profile and the draft capital put into him, we thought could possibly be a factor this year. Yeah. Hasn't come to fruition, but it seems like he might be climbing the depth chart here at the end. You're still not starting him, but it's a guy. It's just a guy to watch, and maybe
if you're desperate,
if he does something this week and maybe week 16 or week 17, we could talk. Who knows?
If you're desperate, I'd rather start Grant Calcaterra or
sure.
who's the else? You're literally Stone Smart, like not even memeing right now. I'd rather start Stone Smart.
I'm never memeing when it comes to Stone Smart.
I guess one of our other targets that's kind of comes from an injury is that Evan Engram is out for the year, and Brenton Strange should be the priority tight end pickup. This is like Brenton Strange is genuinely the guy that needs to go into your starting lineup this week if you're struggling at tight end, just because he was really good at the beginning of the year too. He was getting a lot of red zone targets when Evan Engram was out. What did he have? 10 targets this past week as well?
11
12
catches.
Targets. So, it is clear that this guy is going to be involved in this offense, and Mac Jones has at least shown that he is willing to fucking sling it.
What does he have to lose? I mean,
exactly. So, Brenton Strange is a legit pickup here if you've got, someone that's been pissing you off all season, like a Dalton Kincaid type, right, where you just want something maybe a little more, you had Taysom Hill or Dallas Goedert or whatever, and you need something. Brenton Strange is a legit pickup, and put him in the lineup this week.
Yeah, only 2.1% rostered on ESPN leagues, facing the 29th defense against tight ends, that being the Las Vegas Raiders this week. So there should be some scoring opportunities there for him, or at least catch opportunities. He had 11 receptions this past week. Wild for him.
What are you saying?
The Raiders are fucking bad.
They better fucking lose that game, by the way. This is the Travis Hunter Bowl, possibly.
It's true. I was looking at the standings, and I was like, the pressure's on. So as a Patriots fan, the pressure's on everybody else because we have to play the Bills twice in the next 3 weeks. We're losing both those, and then the other game's the Chargers, so we're probably losing that too. It's going to be pretty easy for us to go 0-3 the next few weeks. It's going to be these other teams, they might fuck it up by winning 1 or 2. Okay, some other waiver targets here that were not associated with those injuries. Kenneth Gainwell is 2.6% owned. Pat, I'm not really advocating for this one. But look, if this Saquon injury turns out to be a thing, maybe you look at a flexy type of guy. He just had a season high in touches second season high in touches with 10 of them, and turned it into 7.5 half PPR points. Just enough points for him to be on radars at least. Wide receivers, we've got Jalen McMillan. Now he's actually coming on here. As
he has really been involved here the last couple of weeks. The Cade Otton love has not quite come to fruition as much as we thought, and it's been in part because Jalen McMillan, has really been involved here.
4 catches for 59 yards and 2 touchdowns last week against the Raiders for 19.9 points. And then this past week against the Chargers, 5 for 75 and a touchdown en route to 16 fantasy points. And then the next 2 weeks, he will play the Cowboys and the Panthers. So definitely some opportunity there for a guy who was already getting the playing time. He just wasn't getting the targets. Now he's getting the targets, turning them into some points, and could be a good sign of things to come. And that'll basically do it, Pat, for our waiver pickups. I'm not advocating for Carson Wentz here, who we have his name down because...
Well, now, obviously, he's not playing. Like, we know that Mahomes is going to be out there. Had Mahomes been out, would have been worth a mention.
It's probably worth mentioning Michael Penix Jr., though. I mean,
yes,
again, it's dicey time of year to be inserting a guy like that. But if you are a team that made the fantasy playoffs with quarterback being your weak spot, you're just loaded everywhere else. Like, I certainly think it's an interesting
you could do worse.
Consideration.
You could do worse.
Going up against the New York Giants and then the Washington Commanders the next 2 weeks. So
and he's got Drake London and Kyle Pitts even amidst the terrible stretch here for the Falcons, a strong run game. Like, he's being placed in about as good of a situation, honestly, as you could for a rookie guy here.
Yeah, definitely a guy to keep an eye on because we know he is just extremely talented. So Michael Penix Jr. on the menu as he is the starter as he is the starter for the Atlanta Falcons the rest of the season. R.I.P. Kirk Cousins. All right, folks, that'll do it for this episode of Brand Coverage. Thank you guys for tuning in, and good luck in your fantasy matchups this week. If you are still alive, if you're not, it's okay. Neither are Pat and I, so we'll commiserate with you.
I got a couple leagues I'm in the semis. Calm down.
No one fucking cares about your 87 leagues that you made it in a couple of them. The only leagues I've heard you talk about this year are ours and the guillotine, and you're out of both, so shut up. All right.
I'm to make 2 of 5.
Yeah, Hawk 2 of 5. All right. Thank you guys for watching. For Pat Customson, I'm Brandon Carney, and we will see you guys next week.
Have fun jorking to Penix. Bye-bye.
And for those of you still in the live chat, we got some questions here. Holy, first of all, Alex, $49.99.
Yeah, Alex, brother.
My brother.
I don't know if you saw me just go like this for a brief moment. Like, that is why I was.
That was Pat's eyes popping out of his head like a cartoon coyote. Alex with $49.99 said, "Brand, big thank you for both motivating me and helping me start my own content creation thing. Pat, your punt on a QB strategy made me a #1 seed in my big money league. Happy holidays to you both. Thank you for letting me be annoying as piss on Twitter, bro. Thank you for your support. You're not annoying. Yeah, I mean, you're not annoying on Twitter at all.
We love." You know, at least from my perspective, Brand's got a lot more followers, a lot more people. I love talking to you guys on Twitter. People slide in my DMs on Instagram. They're like, "Oh, sorry to bother you." Fuck it,
Yeah, dude, as long as
I don't have the following, obviously don't I already doxed myself, so you guys know where I live anyway. But I personally love talking to you guys on social media.
Oh, dude, so do I. As long as people are chill and normal, which Alex, you very much are, and as are most people that reach out to me. Honestly, like, I love talking to you.
Also,
guys, so
someone, God, I forgot who it was, who's DM'd me before on Instagram, sent me one where it was like, send a reel that said, "Send this to a big back," and then he's like, "Oh, sorry, wrong person," and like, I don't know if he was like clowning me, or if, like, it genuinely was an accident. Either way, that's fucking hysterical.
That's extremely funny.
Who was it? You're getting doxxed on here. Connor. I'm assuming his name is Connor.
All right.
Man just called me a big back, whether he meant to or not.
Next message we had here was Malik F15, $1.99 said, "Love your shorts. Are the Lions screwed from winning the Super Bowl? They can still win it.
They're not screwed.
It's a lot harder, but they can.
Took a big
still
hit,
win.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. All right. Sport Gamer with $1.99 said, "Love the channel and podcast. McLaurin or Hall? McLaurin.
Ooh.
McLaurin.
Yeah, McLaurin has just been real.
Brees.
That was the other thing that doomed me. I sat him in the guillotine. So early on Sunday, I'm just like, well, any chance I had is over.
McLaurin is facing the Eagles, though. No. Brees was so bad this week.
Who do the Jets have here?
My problem is that Brees was just so bad against the Jaguars because he's dealing with an injury. They've got the Rams this week, the Jets do. So, like, I think I'm still going Terry. I'm going with Terry to get a better game off on the Eagles than he did last time.
He's been so good.
Yeah,
he's been so good.
Brees has just not been good enough this year. Bailey with $4.99 said, "Tight ends in fantasy are so gross. Trey McBride is tight end 2 with 1 touchdown, and it's a 2-yard rushing touchdown." That's a good point.
And he has another touchdown. It's an other touchdown when he fell on a fumble in the end zone, which also happened to the Cardinals again this past week with fucking Jonah Williams.
Yeah.
That is considered an other. So he has 2 touchdowns on the year, a rushing and an other. And yet he has tight end 2 in, like, not a fluke. He's been great. Like, he has been the volume monster that we thought he could have been. And it's come at the cost of Marvin Harrison. But yeah, just one of the, like I said, the Cardinals have just been the biggest what-the-fuck team in the league. And Trey McBride has just arguably been the biggest what-the-fuck player, but not in a bad way.
I'm so excited to hear the phrases Trey McBride and touchdown regression 4 billion times this offseason.
God.
It's going to be
Mike Clay just busted.
Insufferable. They're gonna be like, if Trey McBride just scored 5 touchdowns, he would have had the best season of all. I can fucking hear it already. All right.
Poor Jay
with
Ferguson.
$1.99, Roger Upton said JSN, MHJ, McLaurin, Bry Robb, and Charbonnet. Start 3.
First
Okay.
of all, you're starting Sean Alexander, a.k.a. Zach Charbonnet, if Kenneth Walker is out. Like, you start that man. He didn't do too much on Sunday night, did he?
I mean, that Seahawks team was
I'm looking here.
kind of
That tough game. But again, like we mentioned with JSN,
Still
here, too,
13.1 in half PPR.
it's
Doable. He
still
scored a touchdown.
relevant. It's still relevant here that, you know, Geno Smith. But yeah, for him to still get 8 carries, obviously they lost. So like that's gonna limit some of the volume here. But I think if Kenneth Walker is out, I think you've got to start Zach Charbonnet. Who do they have this week? They are against the Vikings. So
I think Brian Robinson's a lock. I think Marvin Harrison Jr., Pat, at this point, I'm just not. Like,
nope. Not even considering him.
It's the Panthers defense, but like it doesn't matter. He's not been
Trey
consistent
McBride could
enough.
have 30 catches and then another touchdown this week.
Right.
Like Marvin could have 1 catch for 4 yards. No way.
Exactly.
Yeah, obviously.
I think the answer is, so if Kenneth Walker were to play, it's Robinson, McLaurin, and JSN.
Yes.
If Kenneth Walker doesn't play, and Geno Smith does, this is a caveat as well, because we need Geno to be throwing the ball to JSN.
I think you got to start JSN because with Terry's matchup.
I think you go JSN, Brian Robinson, and Charbonnet in that
Yeah,
case.
if Geno starts, I'd agree. If not, I think I'll go McLaurin over JSN with Sam Howell at the helm, even with Philly. But I think that tough Philly matchup is the difference. If JSN has been a monster, you know, JSN's been everything that people thought DK Metcalf was going to be. But like he is the top dog there now.
$4.99 from Chase. He says, Bran, what should I say to the guy who started Caleb over Goff and lost to me because of it? He's watching, by the way. Brother, I'm not saying you should have known that Jared Goff was going to go for 41 points. I understand that. Why are you starting Caleb Williams against the Vikings on the road? What are we doing? There was no one better out there, not even Jared Goff, just anybody
gritty
else.
on him.
Terrible. You deserve to lose.
my
I say without
Thanks for
knowing
watching.
full context of that situation. Thanks for watching. Appreciate you. Okay, couple questions in here from just the generic chat. If you guys want to toss them in here, we'll answer a few before we go. Let's see. Someone was asking who I think the Giants should draft this year, and then somebody else added Sanders, Ward, Ewers. A quarterback.
It's got you in his name for a reason.
Yeah, not yours. He's gross. Sanders or Ward, I think both of those guys are perfectly fine to take a gamble on.
Can we just be honest here? Shador Sanders is going to be a fucking Raider, even if they have the number 1 pick. Like, it is so fucking inevitable.
Trade the house. To
Whether Dion comes or not. Whether Dion comes as that, well, he did if Shador exists. But whether Dion becomes the head coach or not, Shador feels fucking inevitable. Mark Davis loves the splashy move. I could even see him taking him over fucking Travis Hunter because that's what fucking Mark Davis does. But who do I even like more, Ward or Sanders? I honestly don't know. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I do not know. I am not informed enough to make that to make that call here.
Yeah, I'll say the one thing that worries me about this quarterback class in general is it feels like one of those quarterback classes that teams are having to talk themselves into guys, and that always makes me nervous. Mm-hmm. Like there's
like
not
Will Levis almost that year.
Yeah, and like not to say any of these guys are going to be that bad, but it's like anytime there's not a clear number 1 quarterback, or anytime people aren't talking about like how good the quarterback class is, it's kind of just like that these are the quarterbacks that are in this class.
Well, that's the thing, and
they're good, yeah, but like they're not. No one's saying any of these guys are coming in to save a franchise. No one's been talking about that at all. It's just been about the hype of them.
And it's unfortunate because a lot of teams need quarterbacks, and last year was really the year to do it. You know, Caleb's had his ups and downs, but Jane Daniels has been great. Bo Nix has been really good as well. We're going to see Michael Penix. We probably would have seen J.J. McCarthy, and I'm forgetting another guy that went in the top 12 picks. There's a 6th guy that I'm forgetting. Shit.
Who'd you just name?
Penix, Nix, McCarthy. Man, your boy. I mean, he's been fine. Like, he's been, he's
been as good as he could be with the lack of weapons.
I was going to say, that's just, the circumstances around him are not that good. So it's really unfortunate. If you needed a quarterback, which the Raiders should have done last year, they got Brock Bowers, but these teams here, they might be in for a world of hurt, because if you do kind of have to reach on Ward or Sanders, it's not ideal, necessarily.
Bailey with another $4.99 said, as a Jags fan, can y'all watch my game this week for me? No, I will not be subjecting myself to watching Mac Jones.
They're playing the Raiders. That's the biggest game of the year for the Raiders. That's going to determine whether they can fuck up the number 1 pick or not. I'll be watching.
Oh, it's just like our game versus the Broncos last year that we decided to win in the freezing cold temperatures and snow that I was at and wanted to kill myself, but we got Drake May anyway, so it's okay. Yeah, good luck, Pat. I hope. What's the Jags record? I guess honestly,
I think they have 3 wins, I believe.
Honestly, it's good for us in general that you guys are playing each other. That we need these bad teams to cannibalize each other.
One of those teams is going to get a win.
Someone's going to get a win. So we love that as the Patriots, who are inevitably going 0-3 the next 3 weeks.
I will be cheering for Jacksonville too, an average American.
Couple more. Meme by Blade said, I missed it. Are we starting Cooper Kupp after last week? That's a good question.
Again, it all
obviously
depends.
Last week was a disaster. This week he's going up against the New York Jets. I don't think he's an auto start, and I think if you have anybody on your roster that's been a little more consistent, you could definitely justify. I mean, overall, Kupp's had a pretty nice year. Like, we're looking at double digits every week from week 8 through 12, including a 25-pointer, 15, 16, even had 17 last week against the Bills. But we are now 2 of the last 3 weeks, he's gone for 3 points or less. So that little sample size is kind of ugly. He's not a must bench, but he's definitely benchable if you have any options.
Yeah, but I mean, who would be surprised if he goes out there and has a classic 8 catches for 85 yards and a touchdown?
Nobody.
That's why the 0 was just so fucking jarring.
That's why, to me, if you're starting somebody over Kupp, you need to have somebody in there who you also wouldn't be surprised if they went for 8 catches, 85 yards, that kind of thing. You're not just throwing out, like, I don't think I'm starting Jalen McMillan over Cooper Kupp.
God, no.
I mean, he's been good the last 2 weeks, so I'm sure people are considering that. You get burned by
I was talking more in the sense of, like, JSN. Like, we've been talking about JSN and Terry McLaurin here. Like, I'd feel a little more confident starting those guys.
Yeah, I would agree. All right. I think that'll do it for our show today, folks. Thank you once again for joining us, and we'll be right back here once again next Tuesday, 7:30 Eastern Time, to hopefully help you through your fantasy championship. But for now, for Pat Gustafson, I'm Brandon Carney, and we will see you guys next time.
Good night.